So we're continuing our series of Come and Eat. It's where we're looking at all these meals that Jesus had, especially in Luke's gospel. There's always something going on around the dinner table. And today we're looking at the big picnic. We watch the video, we prepare ourselves with anticipation for what next week will look like as a church gathered together. Now, I love a picnic, and I just want to get a feel of the room. What is your favourite part of a picnic? Because I got shot down this morning for sharing my middle-class opinions with this accent. It's not about the accent. So what's your favourite thing in a picnic? Shout them out. Let's hear it. Chocolate brownies. Absolutely. Didn't think of that. Anybody else? This side. Cheese? Would you go for a full cheese board with grapes and different crackers? Yeah, good. See? Not just me. Anybody else? Pardon? Coleslaw. You were here this morning. I'm yet to have any coleslaw that meets what it reckons it's going to be. I think it's a lie, if I'm being honest. Anything else? Eggs. Yeah, I love eggs too. Yep. Mini sausage rolls. Yeah, super. So I used to love mini Scotch eggs. And then I think that I matured, and now I love a black pudding Scotch egg. Updating from a black pudding pork pie. Flipping heck. If you haven't tried one, David Wilson, the butcher's in York, does a cracking one. You're welcome, David. None of us said fish and barley loaves. I don't know about you, but it's not the thing I'd usually go for. I appreciate Fishing Village, but just this bread and fish. And what's more, the more I've looked at this story, is that the picnic belonged to one little boy. We're talking about a little boy's breakfast. Sometimes when I imagine it, I think it's massive, like cod and it's massive loaves of bread, but it isn't. It's this tiny meal that I assume his parent packed for him because he was going off to listen to this new Jesus guy, a boy. And why did the boy respond? See, I like to imagine what it'd be like to be there, to hear the conversation. And one thing I love about our church family is being around so many different ages, because sometimes it can be so clear to see God's love just by being around the children, like at the 9:15 we have here. I overcomplicated it because I'm an adult. What was the boy thinking? Why was he responding in such a way? And I've concluded that I think it's because he had heard and maybe even seen what Jesus had already been doing, the amazing things that had been done, and he wanted to be involved. I think that is my understanding of what was going on. He saw, he heard, he believed, he wanted to join in with what Jesus was doing. What I love even more is that we read in the different accounts, that's in the different stories of the same story, that there are still leftovers. There's still leftovers. If you remember those shocking Dairy Lee lunchbox things, which has so much salt in them that it could dry out the desert, if you imagine how small that is, I think this is an early Galilean version. It is a small meal, but through Jesus, there's still leftovers. You see, I'm a bit cautious of this sermon because I'm fully aware of what's going on in our country. But I still believe 2,000 years later that we are still challenged to trust that Jesus can do so much more with what we have and what we give in generosity. I believe this is why we can say we have a relationship with God. We can talk to God about it. It's not just a demand, but it's a conversation, foundations rooted in love. You see, the fact is, we too may have seen or maybe just heard stories of Jesus, which is why you're sat here now in this church. And like the little boy, we want to be involved too. So What's in your picnic? What do you have inside you, your gifts, your talents, that Jesus can use? So I find these questions really awkward. I don't know about anybody else. Again, might just be me. What do you have inside that Jesus can use for you personally? I can do it for other people. That's fine. The skills that others have, that's great. But what about you? Sometimes it might just feel like a drop in the ocean of what you can bring. A tiny drop that won't even be noticed. What I find funny about the story, and it said it in the video, is that it specifies it was 5,000 men. So this isn't including women and children. Yet we read in John's gospel that it's a boy who shares his lunch. It's a boy who isn't even included in the 5,000 when they were counting up the heads. What we read is one lunch with Jesus, and it gathers 5,000 people together, not including women and children, sharing, laughing, re-energizing each other, all in his presence. That's why we're so keen to be eating together as a church, like next Sunday, but also when you get together in your small groups. And actually, it doesn't need a label. You could actually just invite somebody around for dinner whenever you want. It's amazing. We enable you. There is a power of eating together. Luke is big on that. So you see, I was just thinking about this. Like, what does it look like, this idea of a drop in the ocean? And I was thinking, like, you might see a big picnic basket. And it's very exciting. You're going to be eating together. A well-used picnic basket. And you might say, this is what I'm going to take. This looks right. This is what we have. But when you actually open it, you've got 6 bags of crisps. Not even McCoy's. Not even the real McCoy. Lidl's own, still very tasty. That's all that's in there. Yet, what we might think is rubbish, and you have a look inside. £10 note. You what? I did set it up. They're not doing a thing. The fact is, I think sometimes we look at others as if they are a picnic basket ready to burst, and we think of ourselves as just a wrapper. We just think of ourselves as something that, we turn up, we're visible, we're there. But I believe that Jesus sees all of us like a wrapper with great potential inside. That £10 that I'm scared I'm going to lose, so I'll put it in my pocket. It is mine. You see, I think sometimes I do doubt that I can bring anything good. Or what's worse, and what I think breaks Jesus' heart, is when we think he can't use us. When we're all different, we're all unique. And we can't see the potential in ourselves sometimes. But that's why we get together. That's why we share with one another. Because we can see God's gift in one another. Again, it might feel like a drop in the ocean, what you bring. But I love this line. It's taken from one of the communion prayers. And just as all the wine and the bread is laid out, as we're remembering that Last Supper, as we're believing that something special and sacred is happening, we declare, all things come from you, and of your own do we give you. What I love is that line comes after the collection, the giving. So we've given money, you've given whatever it may be, and then we carry on worshiping in generosity, remembering why. Imagine what this story would look like. We got to see it in the video, in the cartoon, which I love. Jesus is stood there surrounded by people scattered like sheep. He's there like the shepherd with his flock all around him, sat in groups, all feeding, having their absolute fill. And this should remind you, if it doesn't, don't worry about it, that in John's gospel it says that he tells them that they should sit on the grass. They should sit on the pastures. And I wonder how many of you, it brings to mind Psalm 23, where we remember that the Lord is my shepherd. And in some translations it says, I lack nothing. He leads me beside still waters. He sits me on green pastures. This is what we're doing now, gathered, and this is what we'll be doing next week. Gathering and eating in the safety with Jesus, our shepherd. I believe no matter what we can bring, Jesus can transform it and use it. I tried to be really good and not drift off into the mystics in the early churches, but I couldn't help myself this time. This guy's called James Finley, and he's a mystic writer. And he says this. He says, you already have infinitely more than you need because you have God. You already have infinitely more than you need because you have God. So on the back of the sheets that you had where we're doing the, guess what was in the picnic box? We're just going to hold some quiet now as we write down, what have you got to offer? If you're here with somebody who you know, you might actually be able to help each other. What do you see in the other that they can offer, that they can give to the life of this church, to our community? So we're just going to take a minute of quiet. I invite you at home as well. Put it on the chat. What do you have to offer? Let's just hold the quiet. One thing that we can all offer for ourselves, for one another, for the church, for our country, for our world, is prayer.